I'm now going to attempt to give you, in classic BuzzFeed clickbait style, 9 fake facts about Shakespeare. Fake fact 1. Romeo and Juliet contains a balcony scene. The balcony scene is one of the most famous scenes in theatre history, but Shakespeare's play doesn't contain a balcony. Here's the text of the 1597 quarto at the beginning of Act 1, Scene 2, where modern editions have the instruction, Juliet appears above at a window. There is no balcony, there is no stage direction, it's not even marked out as a separate scene. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word balcony was first used 2 years after Shakespeare died. So where did it come from? In the 17th century, playwright Thomas Otway stole Shakespeare's words and explicitly put his heroine on a balcony. 70 years later, David Garrick's Drury Lane revival of Romeo and Juliet transplanted Otway's popular balcony scene back into Shakespeare's play. Fake fact 2. This is a Shakespeare biography. In the summer of 1593, blah, 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 newborn daughter, blah, 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 spacious house on Henley Street. He may have been working in the glover's shop, perhaps, or making a bit of money as a teacher's or lawyer's assistant. In his spare time, he must have continued to write poetry, practice the lute, hone his skills as a fencer, that is, work on the ability to impersonate the lifestyle of a gentleman. Do you know what we actually knew about this young man's life in 1583? This, the birth of his daughter Susanna. That's it. Bonus fake fact, there's no evidence Shakespeare was born in or ever lived in Henley Street, and the house marketed as Shakespeare's birthplace is a Victorian replica. Fake fact 3, Shakespeare used Warwickshire dialect. Here are the many words claimed to be Warwickshire words in the plays. They fall into 4 categories. Most of them were used across the British Isles by other authors of the period and in books Shakespeare is likely to have read. The second largest group of words was not used by Shakespeare at all. Typos, editorial amendments and wishful thinking from scholars trying to connect Shakespeare to Warwickshire. 5 are Shakespeare's poetic inventions, 2 were adapted from existing verbs. When I published my 10,000 word article on this, which I've just boiled down to 30 seconds, Professor David Crystal said anyone who has studied historical dialectology would see straight away that the attribution of words to Warwickshire alone has no basis in reality. Thank you, Professor Crystal. Fake fact 4. This is Shakespeare's friend and rival. This is Ben Jonson, who left evidence of what looks like a personal connection to Shakespeare, writing, I loved the man and do honour his memory on this side idolatry as much as any. But in the paragraph that follows, more than half of it is lifted directly from Seneca's Controversiae, and what isn't, though it may seem to be about the man, is actually about Shakespeare's writing. That's the stuff in blue. In the first paragraph, he speaks of Shakespeare as their friend, the player's friend, not my friend. I loved the man and do honour his memory on this side idolatry as much as any is something anyone could say of, say, Elvis Presley. If Ben Jonson really knew Shakespeare, why did he have to plunder Seneca to write about him? There's no evidence Jonson knew Shakespeare personally, and if you don't believe me, you should read chapter 9 of this book recently published by the academic publisher Routledge. Fake fact 5, this is Shakespeare's patron. This is the Earl of Southampton. Shakespeare dedicated 2 long poems to him in 1593 and 1594. A patron would have given him money, or at least a place to stay. Southampton had no money for the whole of the 16th century. He was a royal ward until late 1594. He'd inherited massive debts from his father and racked up more of his own, including a £5,000 fine for refusing to marry his guardian's granddaughter. He also had to pay for his 13 years of wardship. 6 Elizabethan poets dedicated works to him. He was patron to absolutely none of them. In the Jacobean period, he finally did become a patron to several writers, but not to Shakespeare. In summary, when he might have been Shakespeare's patron, he couldn't afford it. When he could afford it, he still wasn't Shakespeare's patron. Fake fact 6, my favourite fake fact. This is a portrait of Shakespeare. This is the Cobb Portrait, and this is Professor Sir Stanley Wells, who in 2009 unveiled the Cobb as a new portrait of Shakespeare. Very exciting. Art experts and Shakespeare scholars who aren't Professor Wells say that the Cobb Portrait depicts Sir Thomas Overbury, a courtier who was poisoned while imprisoned in the Tower of London. A huge scandal at the time because the king himself was implicated in Overbury's murder. Hence the sarcastic exclamation mark on the Cobb's Latin inscription, "The friendship of princes," which in the full quote from Horace is a warning to beware of the destructive friendship of rulers. Art historian Sir Roy Strong called Wells's claim codswallop, yet this is now the go-to picture of Shakespeare used by the press. Why? Because Shakespearean scholarship, like 18th century medicine, is based on eminence, not evidence. And Professor Sir Stanley Wells is a very eminent man, and he believes that this is Shakespeare. Why? Because if it was Shakespeare, it would provide the valuable missing link between him and his mythical patron, the Earl of Southampton, whose descendants own the Cobb. It's clearly not the same man depicted on the Stratford Monument, which was erected when Shakespeare's daughters, who presumably knew what their dad looked like, were still living in the town. I mean, you might as well say this is a portrait of Shakespeare. Fake fact 7. Shakespeare was a collaborator. Yes, some of the plays in the first folio were co-authored. Co-authored is the correct word. Co-authorship is not the same as collaboration. This is what collaboration implies, but there are many models of co-authorship. Collaboration, co-authorship. We have no evidence that Shakespeare collaborated with anyone. So why do some scholars insist that Shakespeare wrote collaboratively? Because a collaborative author could not be a hidden author. Yes, Shakespeare scholars use inaccurate words because they're frightened of the Shakespeare authorship question. And here is a fake fact that was explicitly created to defend against the authorship question. Fake fact 8, this is Shakespeare's handwriting. Oh, we all want Shakespeare to be the person who added 3 pages to the play of Sir Thomas More, exhibited by the British Museum and the British Library since 2016 as Shakespeare's handwriting. Why? Because we haven't got any manuscripts in Shakespeare's hand. All we have are these 6 signatures on legal documents. There are so many problems with the argument that the handwriting on the manuscript matches these signatures, but in summary, usual paleographic standards have been suspended. 6 signatures is not an adequate sample size. Signatures would normally never be compared with handwriting. Capital letters would normally never be compared with small letters. The identification rests on a handful of features, some of which are found in only a single signature. Never mind that similarities are in the eye of the beholder. Is this the same writer? Is this the same writer? Differences have been ignored. Where's the dot in the W's? No, never mind all this. The British Library has capitulated and now we're stuck with another bit of complete bollocks about Shakespeare. Fake fact 9, the lack of evidence for Shakespeare as a writer is normal. When compared with 24 of his peers, Shakespeare is the only writer of the era to have left no documentary evidence of a writing life, and this simply isn't normal. Every fake fact I've just shared, apart from the balcony scene, has been manufactured to fill the chasm where that evidence ought to be. Because of that chasm, men in powdered wigs made up a lot of bollocks about Shakespeare. Contemporary scholars not only don't question that bollocks, they make up new bollocks because, frankly, they don't have the balls to say, yes, there is a problem with the evidence around Shakespeare. The fact is, we don't have the evidence for Shakespeare that we should have, and surely it's about time responsible scholars accepted this fact and stopped making stuff up.